Hi, Dave.
Finally. So, yes, we are diving in the kelp forest. And the kelp forest we're in today, here at Anacapa Island, is actually an area that has been protected as an underwater reserve for over 30 years. And so we're seeing something that's a little bit different down here than we see in other waters around the Channel Islands. And the waters here are actually part of this park and part of a marine sanctuary. Channel Islands National Park goes out to 1 mile around each island. Half the park is actually water. And then there's marine sanctuary out to 6 miles. And within that, there is still fishing allowed. If you all look to your right, offshore, you'll see fishing boats. And they're sitting right on the line, right on the border of this marine reserve. And so today, we're going to take a look at the kelp that makes up the primary structure of this forest. And we'll also look at how this kelp forest is affected by things like fishing and other threats. And we'll see what we can do to help protect the kelp forest. So this is giant kelp. And as I mentioned, it's the primary structure of the forest. How many of you think this is a plant? Shout out yes if you think this is a plant. You think it is, it looks like it. It's actually a form of algae. And it's one of the fastest growing things on the planet. It can grow up to 2 feet a day during prime summer months when it gets the right conditions. And it's well adapted to this fluid environment. Unlike a forest on land, where the trees have stiff, rigid trunks, kelp has these flexible, pliable trunks called stipes. And Josh is trying to get you a close-up here. They allow it to flow with the motion of the ocean. There are also blades, which are like leaves, and these little gas-filled bladders, like you see here, that actually help to buoy the kelp up to the surface. And Josh is going to aim the camera up. And what do you guys think is at the surface that the kelp is trying to reach?
Kelp!
Sunlight. I heard someone say sunlight. And so kelp, even though it's growing under the water, it can reach the surface and spread out on a canopy, and some sunlight does make its way here into the water. And kelp actually uses a process called photosynthesis to convert that sunlight, the energy of the sun, into carbohydrates and sugars, and it begins a whole food chain.
Oh, there's
a web of life down here.
There's a fish behind you.
There's a fish behind me. Oh, yeah, look at that big fish, Josh. I think we have that on camera. And that fish is called a sheephead, and it is one of the more colorful and larger fish found down here in the kelp forest. And it is also well adapted. So let me ask you 2 questions. Do you guys think kelp is a producer in the web of life down here in the food chain, a consumer, or a decomposer? Does somebody have an answer to that?
Okay, so the question is it a producer, a decomposer, or a consumer?
Right.
Answer.
Fish eat this, that's a clue.
Consumer!
It is a producer. This produces food as well as providing a habitat for animals. That sheephead is a consumer because it eats some of the things found here in the kelp forest. So, Josh, why don't we make our way over to the... Oh, my God, Josh, turn around and let's get right behind you. There's a whole school of little blacksmith. I wonder if we can get that on camera. Oh, and now they went away.
Oh, we see some of those little black fish and
here,
blacksmith fish.
Exactly. So we're going to make our way over to the wall right here to a rocky reef.
We see the school of fish behind you now, Dave.
Oh, it moved around behind me. Excellent. There's a lot of fish down here right now. So as we make our way in, we're going to look at some different habitats and some of the animals that call these habitats home. So I think, Josh, if we come in on this side of this kelp plant, and we refer to it as a plant, even though, as I said, it is an algae. And so down here, we have a very different habitat than the giant kelp forest itself. It's part of the kelp forest, but these are the rocky areas. And you'll notice that there's all kinds of life, other algae and things that grow on the rocks here. And I found a couple of animals that might look a little strange to you, but probably familiar. And so, Josh, we can show these animals right here that I have in my hands. And I think you'll all know what I'm holding, so go ahead and shout out what you see here.
Sea urchins!
Sea urchins. And you'll notice that I have two different colors and sizes of sea urchins. And this is a red sea urchin, and this is a purple sea urchin. And they are part of the story of the balance of life in the kelp forest. Now, do you think these animals, let's ask that same question, are producers, consumers, or decomposers?
Producers, consumers, or decomposers? Who knows the answer? Okay, you in the yellow. Why don't you tell Dave what you think?
Decomposers?
Decomposer, there is one that's related to these, called a sea cucumber. It acts like an earthworm and decomposes dead and decaying organic material. But these actually are consumers of kelp. In fact, this purple one is having a snack or getting ready to. They'll catch bits of drift kelp in their spines, and they will use their tube feet that I think you can see here to move the kelp around to their mouth in the center of the bottom of the animal. So they actually graze on kelp, but they're actually considered, they're considered producers because they are eaten by things like those sheephead. And they have big lips and strong jaws and sharp teeth, and they can crack through these spines and get to the animal, the softer part inside. Now, who else do you think, besides sheephead, eat sea urchin? Do any of you think people might be consumers of sea urchins?
Otters.
Otters, for sure, yeah. Otters eat a lot of sea urchins. We do, too. People eat red sea urchin. And they don't eat purple sea urchins because they're too small. There's not enough meat or food in the purple sea urchin to make it viable. And so if you have an area that's not protected, like this marine reserve, and a lot of these red sea urchins get taken out of the habitat, more purple urchins will come in to fill the void, and they'll actually populate to such a level that they will decimate entire kelp forests. And so it's important that we have a balance of these two animals here in the kelp forest. And we're finding that these marine reserves, these protected habitats, allow them to balance out. So I'm actually going to go ahead and give these sea urchins to my support diver. Let's see if I can call him in here, because I want him to actually take them. And this is our support diver, Merrill, who you saw on the surface, and to make sure he puts those in a real safe, protected area. Thank you, Merrill, because we don't want to do any damage to them. But, well, I was talking about sea urchins. Our other diver, Diver Dan, found something more exciting. And let's see if I can get a good handle on this. Everybody shout out, what is this that I'm holding right now? Lobster! Yeah. Now, most people think lobsters have claws. Do you see any claws on this lobster? No. This is a California spiny lobster. Unlike lobsters on the East Coast, or lobsters you often find on your dinner plate, these lobsters use the bumps and spines on their back for protection. They don't have claws, but they do have these large antennae that are sensory organs and help them to, in a way, see through the kelp forest. They do have eyes, though, as well. And as we look at this, this is a male lobster. these little paddle-like objects called swimmerets on a female would be much larger, and she would use those to tuck eggs in her tail and protect those eggs. But this is an animal like the sea urchin that relies on kelp and kelp forest for survival. It doesn't eat kelp, but look how well it camouflages into the bottom of the kelp forest. And it also eats animals that live in the kelp forest, like little crabs and crustaceans. Now, of course, people like to eat these animals as well, and so having protected areas like these marine reserves allows for these animals to reproduce. Now, do you think that older lobsters produce more baby lobsters than younger lobsters, or the opposite? Gene, does somebody have a guess?
The question was, do larger lobsters produce more babies,
Right.
or do smaller lobsters produce more babies?
Smaller?
Actually, the answer is larger. It may be surprising to you, but the older a lobster gets and the bigger it gets, the more babies it produces. So in areas where lobsters can be fished, they don't get a chance to get as big as this one, and they don't produce as many babies. Their babies, as larvae drift, or as baby lobsters drift way offshore and might drift back into the coast, all up and down the coast in areas inside the reserve and outside the reserve. So having protected areas here don't only help provide for lobster populations in the reserve itself, but in all the areas of the kelp forest. So I'm going to give this lobster, again, back to Ranger Dan so that he can make sure he also releases that lobster back into a nice, safe cave or crevice so that it can sleep. Lobsters are awake during the night, not during the day. Now, as we move, Josh, I think we'll make our way back and see if we can find a very colorful fish in the kelp forest.
The sea lion is behind you swimming around.
Let's take a look at that if we can see it. Did you guys get a shot of that, or Josh, are we able to see that?
Yeah, I think we all saw that.
All right. So, sea lions are very common. They're one of the top predators in the kelp forest. And that brings up an interesting point of discussion. You guys had a lot of questions about sharks when they were on the surface. Is it coming back?
Yeah, it came right behind you.
All right. And sharks are also top predators, like the sea lion. Mostly they eat fish, but some sharks even eat the sea lions. And so if we fish out too many sharks, and millions of sharks are fished out every year out of the oceans, many just for their fins, then we upset again the balance of the kelp forest. And so that is one of the threats we've been talking about. And Josh, do we want to make our way, try to work our way back towards the area where we're going to try to see if we can find a Garibaldi that sometimes is up on a shelf here. And so fishing is one of the threats to the kelp forest. And bear with Josh because he has the harder job now. He has to swim backwards and avoid getting tangled in the kelp. But do you guys know what some other threats to the kelp forest might be and to the ocean in general besides overfishing?
Oh, we're looking at a Garibaldi fish right now.
Oh, we are? Okay, well, we have one in there's the sea lion, too, in an unusual situation. So let's shift again, and let's follow that Garibaldi and talk about that. This is the state of California's official marine fish, and it's much more colorful than many of the other fish in the kelp forest. So, do you think there's an advantage to being colorful or to blending in and being camouflaged like that kelp bass that you see right next to it? So,
Oh, wow, what a duo there. We got the camouflage kelp bass and the bright orange Garibaldi. And are you asking
so
if
let's
it's...
ask one of the students, which do you
Is
think
it better
would
to be bold and colorful, or is it better to be camouflage?
Camouflage.
Yeah, camouflage, so you can hide more easily. Well, the answer is both. There are different strategies for different species. And so an animal that's camouflaged can hide more easily, but that bright orange Garibaldi is actually a really aggressive fish And it sort of stands right out and says, hey, here I am. Don't come after me or I'll challenge you. I'll take you down. And so it actually uses that color as a warning. And that is a male Garibaldi, and they will entice a female in. They'll groom a nest made out of red algae.
Oh, we can also see a baby Garibaldi.
Oh, with the nice colors, the blue and the orange. And so because of their brightness, Garibaldis were often collected by people to put in aquariums. And so they're protected now twice. Once because they're in a marine reserve, the ones here, but also as the official state marine fish, they're not allowed to be collected. And so we can see that lobsters camouflage, kelp bass camouflage, but Garibaldis have a whole different strategy for survival down here. So, again, we've seen, hang on a sec, caught up on a little bit of kelp here. There we go. So we've seen some of the animals that call the kelp forest home, and we've talked about the threat of overfishing. But again, does anyone know what another threat to the kelp forest might be besides fishing?
Pollution.
Pollution, yeah. So pollution is a big threat. There could be oil spills that affect the kelp forest, plastics, some of your lunches if you don't be careful about keeping the trash and putting it away properly, it might blow into the ocean. And here at the islands, we're further from more of the populated areas, and so there's less pollution out here, but there's still some. And so that is a threat. Also, this kelp thrives in this cool water. I mentioned it's about 61 degrees down here right now. And if the water's warm too much, like they did last summer with the El Nino, the kelp will die off. In fact, we lost most of the kelp. But remember how fast it grows, so it is starting to come back. And since the animals down here rely on kelp and all these other algae for their habitat and for food, if the kelp goes away, so do the animals. There are over 1,000 different kinds of plants, algae, and animals that call the kelp forest home. We've seen a few of them today, and we've seen a couple of the threats, and there are very simple things you can do to help the kelp forest. One is to just not pollute. Fish within the rules, and also try to be responsible consumers to help temper the effects of climate change. And we're doing our part by enacting or having reserve areas like this, protected areas, in order to help the oceans thrive as well. And this is important not just for those fish and that sea lion that was so cool to see, and the lobster and the kelp itself, but it's also important for all of us. Because as you've heard my broken mask make the stuttering breathing noise throughout this program, you guys are breathing in air as well. And you may not know this, but kelp and other marine algae produce most or much of the oxygen for the planet. So if you all take a deep breath, you're breathing in oxygen in that air that was partially produced by kelp and marine algae. So let's do our part, all of you, all of us, to help protect the oceans for us and for our kids and their kids for future generations as well. So thank you guys, Madera School. Hopefully people are watching this on the internet. I'm glad we were able to pull this off with some tech problems at the beginning, but we got it to you and you saw some cool things down here. And so I'll say goodbye, Josh and I, and
well, thank you, Dave and Josh and Meryl and Dan, so much for putting on this presentation from Madera School. They're all clapping, and I'm sure they're all going to give you a big thank you.
Right. We're going to make our way back, guys, and we'll see you on the surface. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.